Performance in a Posthuman Age and the Circus of Freaks is the second research project of Digital Lab Performance. The project is supported by the British Council Creative Collaborations Grant Programme, and the seminars are a collaboration between Digital Lab Performance and the Centre for Contemporary Theatre at Birkbeck College, University of London. Now I would like to welcome the Director of British Council in Turkey, Jill Caldicott, to open this event. Hi, Jill. So I'll just mute myself and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope everybody can hear me. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here at the opening of this new programme, Performance in a Posthuman Age, initiated by Digital Lab Performance Initiative and Shelley from Istanbul, in collaboration with Dr. Seda İlter, Programme Director of MA Dramatology at Dramaturgy, sorry, mispronounced there, at Birkbeck, University of London, to explore the intersections of performance art with eco-criticism, ecofeminism, and post-humanism theories. I'm really intrigued to see that the programme is rich with hybrid seminars, virtual and live, where academicians from Turkey and UK will present, as well as workshops and open rehearsals as well. Inspired by Donna Haraway's concepts of cyborgs, freaks and monsters, this programme aims to make collaborative research, readings and a devised dramatology on the iconic Gothic characters of eco-feminist literature, Shakespeare's supernatural characters and the monsters of Anatolian culture and geography. I'm sure you'll join me when I say that I will be looking forward to seeing the Freaks fashion show performance at the end of this laboratory process as a work in process. So our many thanks to our grantee, Digital Lab Performance Initiative, Shelley and Seda, and a welcome to all our speakers today, Dr. Caroline Edwards and Beatrice Cabot. So I'm very pleased that the British Council is supporting such an innovative project on the future of the performing arts. As I hope many of you will know, the British Council is all about connections and creating opportunities and supporting new talent. And therefore this event brings together scholars, students, artists, creatives, and it deserves our praise and congratulations. Just a tiny bit about the British Council's programme in Turkey. Arts is central to our wider cultural relations portfolio, which also includes education and English. And we focus on developing the skills of new curatorial voices and creative entrepreneurs who champion more inclusive and accessible arts offerings. There are 3 programmes: Culture Connects, Arts Responds to Global Challenges, and Creative Economy. And brokering and connecting is the essence of our programme. So the aim with globally challenging collaborations with globally challenging issues, of course, is to link creative and civil society sector in Turkey with the UK in partnership in programmes, and to stimulate dialogue about difficult issues such as gender equality, disability and climate change. In Creative Economy, we're looking to support non-physical ecosystems and infrastructures that support creative and cultural industries and help them to thrive. And this programme comes under what we call Cultural Connects. It's a creative collaboration grant. It's developed to create cooperation deliberately between the creative sectors in the UK and in Turkey. And this is the first year, and we had 65 applications, of which 21 were successful, and this project is one of the successful ones from across the country. And so with the grant call, we're very happy to be part of these original and creative project collaborations. And I'm very much looking forward to listening to the talks today and to the rest of the programme. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill, and thanks for your support. The first speaker is Dr. Caroline Edwards, who will be talking about posthuman eroticism. So after Caroline finishes her presentation, we will then have a Q&A about that specific presentation. So please write your questions and comments in the Q&A chat box during the presentation, and please keep your mics off throughout the presentation. Thanks, Caroline. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Seda. Okay, let me just start sharing my screen. I have a really old computer, so it's a little bit slow. Can everybody see that? Perfect. In her fiery book called The A Human Manifesto, published in 2020, the UK philosophy professor Patricia McCormick argues that the current climate emergency is so serious, we require immediate, radical, direct action to dismantle the dominance of the human. Academic work, she reminds us, is nothing without accompanying action, and the action required to meet the scale of the current challenge requires optimism and adaptability. It requires radical compassion. As she writes, and I quote, "This manifesto may seem to hate humans. It does not. It simply sees different trajectories to the more typical political academic human versus non-human arguments. It is a manifesto of joy, but the joy is for all life, not only ours. It is a manifesto that repudiates hierarchy, that refuses that some human rights should be privileged over others, and that human rights should be privileged over non-human." So being a human, according to Patricia McCormick, is not the same thing as being anti-human or being against all of humanity. And increasingly, everywhere I turn in my own academic research, which is within broadly defined the environmental humanities, this idea of joy for all life, not only ours, is to be found in so many places. In Robert Macfarlane's joyous and terrifying descent into the depths of limestone caves, of ancient catacombs and sweltering rock salt mines in his book Underland. In the American anthropologist Anna Lowenhaupt Singh's reverence for the Matsutake mushrooms in her wonderful book, The Mushroom at the End of the World, which remind us how mushrooms upend all categories of epistemology and ontology. And also in Merlin Sheldrake's rejoinder to look beyond the animal kingdom and to uncover the mysterious, mind-blowing fungal worlds beneath our feet in his book, Entangled Life. I see it in Rachel Carson's insistence that the living ocean beneath our passenger ships is a rich topographic realm of biospheric diversity, and also in Philip Hoare's poetic love songs to the sea. This joy is evident too in Jeffrey Jerome Cohen's Geophilia, or Love of Rocks, in which he describes them as rich in worlds not ours, while we are poor in their duration. As we approach the planet's 6th mass extinction event and the devastating, destabilizing consequences of climate emergency as it impacts on human life, a shift in perspective is urgently needed. Anthropocentrism, by which I mean the way in which we understand the world through our own limited human perspective, in which everything is in relation to our human perspective, has definitely failed us. And whilst this might be a post-humanist endeavour, it doesn't have to be an anti-humanist one. As the post-humanist philosopher Rosie Braidotti teaches us, and Rosie Braidotti was a student of Donna Haraway's, post-humanist thinking releases the human subject into an expanded, affective and ontological realm of connectedness and relationality. In my current book project, I'm thinking about how we can rethink the category of the human outside of binaries of nature and culture, outside of hierarchies that privilege humans above other animals, plants, insect life, and also ecological systems. Of course, humans are animals too. We're made of ecological and biological matter. Indeed, scientists have recently discovered that almost half of the human cells in our body are not our own. They're not even human cells, but they are so-called microscopic colonists composed of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other organisms. This hidden half of ourselves, which we term the human microbiome, reveals that we are in fact more microbial than we are human. And the microbiome plays an essential role in digestion, regulating our immune systems, protecting us against disease. In fact, in thinking about the human as a sovereign individual, I think I should be able to move everybody that way so you can see some of my quotations, hopefully. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, we can see all of them very clearly. We don't see anything
Oh,
else.
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Sarah. In fact, thinking about the human as a sovereign individual, a discretely bounded subject, as Descartes' cogito said, I think, therefore I am, turns out to have been a fallacy all along. The evolutionary biologist Lynn Margulis notes that of all the organisms on Earth today, only bacteria are individual. All other live beings, organisms such as animals, plants, and fungi, are metabolically complex communities of a multitude of tightly organized beings. That is, what we generally accept as an individual animal, such as a cow, is recognizable as a collection of various numbers and kinds of autopoietic entities that, functioning together, form an emergent entity, the cow. Individuals are all diversities of co-evolving associates. So for me, one way of trying to think about becoming a bit less human in that older liberal humanist sense and becoming perhaps more humane, understanding ourselves as part of an entangled ecosystem of organic and non-organic matter, necessitates a rethinking of our relationships with the elements. Beyond considering human survival amidst an intensifying onslaught of elemental violence at a time of climate emergency, we might ask ourselves, what if the elements were more than just a threat? It can be quite a hard question to think about at a time of rising sea levels, volatile climate patterns which cause unpredictable and severe flooding, extended hurricane seasons, and rampaging wildfires as far north as the Arctic tundra. How then can an elemental approach help us to uncover new modes of ecological engagement? And could we think, rather than being afraid of these increasingly violent elements, as perhaps being in love with them? And this takes us back to the pre-Socratic Greek philosopher Empedocles, who insisted that fire, air, water, and earth were not only the basic elements of life, but that we should have a philia for them, a particular love for them, that we might learn to love them in the inescapable flux of being, in a pattern of ceaseless change, even when it threatens our own survival. Oops. So this brings me to my topic today, which is the mixed media collages and sculptures of the Kenyan-born artist Wangechi Mutu. Mutu's work, I think, helps us to imagine the possibilities of what the inhuman might actually look like within a context of environmental collapse, and what is increasingly being referred to by scholars as the cultures of human extinction: texts, video games, films, artworks that are reflecting on what the world without us might come to look like. Wangechi Mutu is known for her violent, unnerving juxtapositions of human, animal, vegetal, and mycelial forms into arresting hybrids. As one scholar puts it, her work deliberately inhabits colonial tropes of Africa as a site of sex, of mysticism, and of unbridled nature, as well as contemporary tropes of Africa as diseased and blood-stained horror. And she does this in order to subvert these ideas and these images. In Wangechi Mutu's work, then, the Black female body is repeatedly ripped apart and reassembled within fantasy landscapes that speak of death and decomposition, but also of regenerative regrowth. As Chelsea Frazier argues, In Mutu, we find a cultural producer imagining new mutations of humanity and constructing new ecologies rich with utopian possibility that reflect and audaciously critique the racial, spatial, and gendered ordering of our present world." End quote. Critics often refer to the aggressive awkwardness of her use of collage as an aesthetic technique across her oeuvre. Drawing on a particular art history that references, amongst other things, Martha Rosler's collage of Playboy centerfolds, situationist détournement, Wangechi Mutu juxtaposes Black models from porn magazines with cutouts from titles such as National Geographic. She makes spectacles of flesh that are incomplete and yet somehow overdetermined, subject to too many interpretive frameworks. Her use of collage reminds us of the grotesque hybridity of the kinds of freaks I suspect we'll be thinking about across this series, such as Octavia Butler's aliens in the Xenogenesis trilogy, or Mary Shelley's creature from Frankenstein, sutured together by Dr. Victor Frankenstein out of the corpses from the nearby Bavarian graveyards. At once both alien and earthy, the women in Mutu's collages are trans-species pinups of a different kind. Their skin tones are not just the natural skin tone of the Black female body, but violet, blue, green. They're often dappled and stippled like leopards or like animal skin. They drip and they move. They're splotchy and moist. It's chameleon-like skin, no longer standardized by race. They often seem fungal, floral, or animal. So let's have a look at a good example. This is a work called Riding Death in My Sleep from Mutu's Hybrid series. And I analysed this image partly because it's got mushrooms in the foreground. And one of the chapters that I'm writing is all about mushrooms. The Black female subject of the piece crouches on a small patch of ground festooned with tan-coloured toadstools. There are discombobulated avian hydrozoan forms in the background. They're moving kind of gelatinously around behind her. They're ambiguous in terms of their taxonomy. And they give this shimmering sense that we might be above ground, but we might also be underwater. And it lends the entire scene this sense of the origins of life, of an evolutionary beginning of elemental abiogenesis. The woman seems to be naked, wearing only stiletto boots. Stilettos are a feature of Mutu's work. She's really into high fashion, and so a lot of her female figures, no matter how animalistic or non-civilized, are always wearing stiletto boots, which I find really interesting. Her skin is marbled in these mottled watercolor splotches that remind us of the markings of mammals, but also perhaps of diseased human skin. And the colors that are used here, slimy, dark green, rich reddish ochre, umber, pale sandy beige, are very tactile. They give us this sense of natural textures like soil or hide or skin, piebald fur patterns perhaps. On her legs, we can see this yellow foliage that looks like dried grass. But perhaps the most distinctive part of the painting is the woman's head. Echoing the mushroom caps beneath her feet, her own cranium is globular. It seems to be glowing. And it's the white or Asian physiognomy of another woman who has been collaged and superimposed onto a Black female body. In these incongruously glamorous stilettos, this woman is ethnically unrecognizable, and she straddles modernity as well as alternative timescales of some mysterious alien realm. As Michael E. Veal, an ethnomusicologist at Yale University who specializes in African American music, and who apparently Wangechi Mutu studied with when she was working as an art student in New York, He says these women appear at times conjured from a fantastical realm of nocturnal toadstool reveries, at other times fabricated from the rotting remains of open sewers, garbage heaps, or toxic waste, alternately engaging in mutual frolic or ecstatic disfiguration. Their glorified orifices bestow life-giving fluids and anoint the land with toxic elixirs. This is the ecstatic aesthetic of trauma. So I'd like to just sketch out today what how the arboreal, so relationships with trees, and also the mycological relationships with mushrooms, fungi, and their underground rhizome root networks, and how these work in Mutu's collages. Here is another example. This is quite a famous work of hers called Yo Mama from 2003. It's a diptych. It's composed of 2 parts, and it's a brilliant example and a good introduction, I think, to her work as a whole. Slouching suggestively, legs splayed in a deliberately eroticized manner, the recumbent figure of Eve from the garden, from Adam and Eve from the Bible, sorry, perches amongst veldt-like grasses of the South African savanna. Her left hand and shoulder support the weight of a phallically elongated version of the biblical snake that haunts the Garden of Eden. Its decapitated head is being skewered by her 6-inch stiletto boot, which is decorated with African raffia grass, and there is blood pouring out of the wounds, as in a horror film. The pink background is riven with movement, as we saw in the previous work. There are massively oversized fungal spores and wobbling little eddies of movement that look like sperm. The depthlessness of the picture is very ambiguous. Are we floating in the air? Are we underwater? Are we in space on an alien planet? The only other seemingly solid patch of ground is a jellyfish-like globular invertebrate on the right-hand side of the image, covered with small palm trees with blackened trunks and blue leaves. With its biblical significance of peace and eternal life, the palm tree completes this surreal religious scene. And in fact, this version of Eve refers to a real woman. Yo Mama pays tribute to a pioneering Nigerian feminist who fought against female genital mutilation, Funmilayo Anikulapo Kuti. And some critics have referred in Mutu's work to the suggestiveness of mushrooms, representing perhaps the immigrant experience. They're a metaphor for immigration, for people becoming separated from their own countries who settle, whether by necessity or force, in areas seen as intolerable by others. But one of the things I found in my research on Wangechi Mutu was that nobody seemed to have written about trees and the importance of trees. So I'll just talk you through a few works that I think can help us think about the post-human in relationship to trees. Even if we go back to her earliest collages, Wangechi Mutu was looking at tree trunks, branches, and rhizomatic root systems when thinking about the Black female figure. The exaggerated, sexualized women, composed out of numerous anatomical parts, often lean against the bark of tree trunks. They frolic and flicker into avian and vegetal forms, sprouting fluid tendrils. They peck at each other in what could be either aggressive foreplay or predatory kill. They writhe and explode in unnatural congress. As you can see from, let's see, another image here, the image on the right-hand side, this reassembled female form draws strength from her contact with the earth. Her limbs are splaying into mycelium, the fungal root systems. Her complex root systems penetrate her figure until she becomes an assemblage of multiple species of different kinds. And other times, the human figure remains relatively intact in these works, set against trees frequently. As we can see in the image on the left here, praying mantra, The woman's form might appear to be relatively stable, but there's a really unnerving sense of scale. It makes you feel almost nauseated trying to work out what's happening in this picture. And it plays strange experiments with three-dimensional space. Foreground and background are kind of smashed together in a chaos of primary colours. It becomes queasy, the geometries don't quite work. Or as in the image on the right, the noble savage, a festooning cluster of palms in the sky, and the mismatching of scales here show how a woman is slowly turning into a tree. And actually, when I went back and looked at her earliest work, which is much harder to find anybody who's written about this, we can find that women turning into trees is a kind of common motif, and it lends a sexual potency to the erotic power of Wangechi Mutu's collages. So these are two sketchbook drawings done just over 10 years apart. We can see the importance of tree trunks and branches into the vegetal dismembering of the female form. In the ink line drawing on the left, a woman's crotch forms the apex of a tree trunk, providing support for the bird. And in the sketch on the right, similarly, it retains the woman's sex organs in the naked buttocks and the partially adorned legs and feet with the ubiquitous stiletto boots. But from the waist upwards, this woman is all tree. Bushy palm fronds are bursting across the page in glorious arboreal profusion. The eponymous diptych, A Shady Promise, so this was reproduced in a book called A Shady Promise, which is one of Wangechi Mutu's best known published works. This takes the viewer even further into this freakish, grotesque intimacy of women and trees. Squatting with her back arched against a bending river-like tree trunk, this woman is masturbating the woody tendrils in her groin. As with the other figures I've shown you already, there's an odd sense of movement, but also stasis in her pose, and this image is explicitly sexualized. In characteristic style, the pair of lips that has been superimposed onto her collaged face is oversized and introduces an exaggeratedly sexualized element that has historically been used to signify Black femininity. And as I mentioned, Mutu often uses pornographic imagery, which she cuts up and reassembles. So publications such as Black Tail, for example. As Chelsea Fraser says, Black women are routinely positioned in visual arts, with their legs splayed or squatting on all fours. And often the images focus on their complacent faces, sexually explicit and inviting gestures. So Wangechi Mutu is taking this racialized stereotype of Black, eroticized, over-sexualized women, and she's turning it into something much darker and more grotesque and more threatening, I think. It's striking how this exaggerated eroticism and sexuality is coming because of the contact with the tree, and how in this fantastical remediation, the tree becomes almost like an Ouroboros. It doesn't have a trunk with branches, it just has two sets of roots. And it's non-reproductive, I guess. This tree would not be able to be pollinated and to reproduce. So there's another interesting element to non-reproductive sexuality, as well as non-human sexuality. So when we're thinking then about the aesthetic dismemberment of the woman and the tree, we see what I'm calling a new elemental aesthetic emerging here. And I look at this elemental aesthetic not just in artworks, but also in literature and in film and in other sculpture and things like that. Space is non-Euclidean. That is to say, it is impossible. It is weird. It is the kind of space that H.P. Lovecraft wrote about in his weird literary stories in the early 20th century. In a dreamlike place that is loathsomely redolent of spheres and dimensions apart from ours, as he described it. But also time is non-linear. And the aesthetics of collage as a medium here does strange things to time in Wangechi Mutu's work. As the designer and curator Justin Smith writes, collage is a form of timekeeping, time coding, and time capsuling our creative lineages along an amplified spectrum. As he goes on to say then, through these historical lineages, collage is a non-linear depiction of time. It evokes nostalgia and memory. And what I find really interesting is that Justin Smith also goes on to argue that collage is an intrinsically Black visual aesthetic. He says that Blackness itself exists in a collaged form, stacking layers upon layers of the vernacular tradition and iconography, and of course being almost entirely overlooked from the Western artistic canon. There's not very much written about the relationship between Black racial identity and Black artists using collage as an experimental form. And this idea that Blackness itself exists in a collage state is really interesting, I think, for thinking about posthumanism. It visually represents what Kirsten Lilvis calls posthuman Blackness, which she describes as the empowered identity of men and women who have to live in multiple different timescales. It's a powerful rejoinder to the linear time of settler colonial time in the North American context. And it's also an expression of queer possibility. So queer theorists talk about the utopian promise of a time to come, a time that maybe lies waiting, in which they could be openly gay without fear of reprisal or violence. Like mushrooms, this time can pause its sporulation or germination until the conditions are most favourable in which it might flourish and reproduce. And if we attune our gaze to the multiple timescales of these images, I think their inhuman properties become visible. So Wangechi Mutu's use of the Black female body then explores grotesque materialities that break down clear distinctions between the animal, the vegetal, the mycelial, the fungal, and the human, and are often read within the framework of Afrofuturism. And I think this is a specifically elemental aesthetics. And as Wangechi Mutu has said in interview, she says, I put a lot of love and hope and earth and dignity and feminine energy into every piece that I make so that I can awaken the power within for each and every one of us. I want people to feel how incredible our role as a human species is, how important it is to be a humane human. And I want to think about that idea of a humane human and whether that relates back to Patricia McCormick's idea of not being human, that maybe by not being human, we might actually become more humane to all the other life forms around us and on which we depend for our own survival as a species. And this is something that academic scholars working in eco-criticism also talk about. And particularly, there's a small number of people working on something called elemental eco-criticism. They think about the elements like water, fire, air, and rock. And there are two in particular, Jeffrey Jerome Cohen, who I've mentioned, and Lowell Duckert. And they write in a book called Elemental Eco-Criticism that the less human we become, the more humane we might be. And by less human, what we mean is moving beyond anthropocentrism. So thinking about Wangechi Mutu then, several of her works use wood, often silver oak, paper pulp, wood glue, and sometimes she also incorporates soil into her mixed media collages. The previous image that I was just showing you, called Seeing Cowries, is a sculpture which extends from the human and the arboreal or the tree-like branches into this very fluid kind of form. It's structural, it's architectural. It sort of reminds me of the floating islands of Laputa in Gulliver's Travels. It expresses the joint divinity of nature and the human, as Wangechi Mutu says herself. And then we have other works like the Sentinel series here and the Tree Woman as well, that strike these kind of powerful feminine poses and are made out of branches. The tips and twigs of the women's feet have the appearance often of stilettos. There are gnarly branches that come out of their heads, often resembling a thick plait of African hair. The postures suggest confidence, sexiness, self-possession, and a wooded entanglement, a complete symbiosis of female figure and tree-like form. Joyous and powerful, these are finely calibrated collaborations between wood and between the woman, an elemental aesthetics that shows us what becoming inhuman perhaps might look like. Okay, so I'm just going to move towards a conclusion, I think. In recalling the history of dehumanization, which is a particular problem for thinking about Black aesthetics, because of course the proximity between the Black female figure and inhuman materials like wood or rock or earth reminds us of the way in which Black human bodies were denied full humanity in a racist process of dehumanization that we can trace back to the German Enlightenment philosopher Hegel. As one Black scholar, Joseph Winters, reminds us, according to Hegel, world spirit skips over Africa, meaning that Africa does not participate in the development of reason, truth, and freedom. Hegel's thought thus demonstrates how the logic of progress operates to establish and justify racial hierarchies. So it's incredibly important not just to think about why we might not want to be human, according to Enlightenment liberal humanist philosophies, but also to think about how violent those ideas of the human were, and all of the different kinds of humans who were excluded from being fully recognized as human. And I think Wangechi Mutu's works remind us of this process of dehumanization, but they occupy and reclaim the non-human in a powerful kind of way. They take that sort of oppression and racist idea of dehumanization and they subvert it. They give us an example of a more than human subjectivity, which can be read via the Black literary critic and poet Sylvia Wynter's ideas of Black counter-poetics. They offer us images of hopeful non-human futures where the human and the arboreal have become entwined to the point of a species-defying assemblage, a tense of possibility that Black feminist scholars refer to as the future real conditional, the moment which will have had to happen in the future after a process of liberation. So making visible the power that resides in our more than human relationships with plants, with objects, with other life forms, gives us some kind of image of escape from the entrapments of the human, and a wonderful example of Sylvia Wynter's Counter-Poetics. So Sylvia Wynter then describes Counter-Poetics when she's talking about blues music and its particular rhythms and times. And she describes blues as without climax or end, outside of the established time of European sense of time, of productive factory time. It's a space and a subversive territory of place. It makes of time into space, a territory free from enslaved labor. This is the Counter-Poetics. So, sorry, just to conclude then, to think about how Wangechi Mutu's work with the figure of the Black form becoming the tree or being merged with the tree asks us to rethink our perspective beyond the human into a realm of non-human futurity. And I think that trees and their fungal, maybe 2 minutes, Seda, is that okay to finish? Yeah, thank you. Trees and their fungal partners might actually be able to save us in our contemporary moment of climate catastrophe. I mentioned at the start the American anthropologist Anna Lowenhaupt-Singh and her influential work, The Mushroom at the End of the World, where she argues that mushrooms contain an important lesson to help us survive in precarious times as a species. So she focuses on the image of the Japanese Matsutake mushroom, which is it's the only life form to have emerged in the ruined landscape around Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the radioecology, which killed off all other life forms. She says that these mushrooms can survive nuclear Armageddon, that they are hopeful signs amidst the environmental wreckage, and that they might help us to think beyond and through ecological ruination. That they encourage us to forage, to unearth collaborative strategies for survival, to think about how we as a species could survive and how we might need to become a little bit less human and a bit more mycological in order
Thank you
to
so much,
survive.
Caroline. This is mind-blowing.
Thank you.
I haven't formulated this as a question, or I mean, it could be a question, comment, because I've been writing down loads of notes. I'm really fascinated by this kind of transgressive, decentered form. And you use the word grotesque, which kind of I always find fascinating, predominantly in relation to Mikhail Bakhtin's idea of the grotesque and how those kind of transgressive forms kind of subvert the accepted narratives and norms of our understanding of kind of what it is, what we mean by being human. And also I am really fascinated, like, I don't know how I'm going to combine these things, but I'm fascinated by the concept of time and how the concept of time in her works are very different from our kind of linear timeline, which is kind of more dreamlike. And that obviously, I think, says something about, or kind of critical about the capitalist system as well. Okay, let me find my question. Yeah, okay, so if, for example, in relation to theatre, this is something that I always wonder. We know that in the last kind of 15, 20 years, especially play texts written about climate crisis, which tend to kind of represent climate crisis or ecological changes in a kind of negative narrative form, like kind of catastrophic narratives. They do not necessarily have a kind of an effective response for the audience, because we tend to look away from these catastrophic visualizations of what we're going through. So then I always kind of think about whether the form of comedy is a kind of better form to actually talk about these things, which will maybe engage the audiences or the readers kind of better, kind of or more effectively. So I'm not kind of emphasizing on the comedy here, but what I am finding is kind of this element of grotesque is there is something that makes me, when I look at the images as well, yeah, there are things that make you feel, oh, what's that? But on the other hand, sometimes I'm kind of smiling at these kind of very interesting use of color, textures, and definitely stiletto boots, which is fascinating as a kind of consistent element. So I wonder if in her way of responding to these issues that she's taking issue with, if there is some form of a suggestion that this is a kind of about a tonality, maybe about how we should be thinking about who we are and how we should be responding somehow on an everyday basis, which is kind of slightly outside our anthropocentric routing, if that makes sense. So that's kind of almost a different routing than our very egoistic, inward-looking perceptions of the self. Well, I don't have a question.
Yeah. Maybe if I could respond, I was lucky enough to see not the works I've shown you, but newer pieces at a recent exhibition at the Hayward Gallery in London's South Bank Centre. And one thing I hadn't really appreciated was just the beauty of the materials. A lot of these works sparkle. she uses kind of mixtures of sort of earth and rare metals and precious elements. So they're kind of glittery. They're a lot more sort of camp than I was expecting. I never see that in the printed, you know, version in the book catalogues I've been studying or images online. But it was so interesting watching people's reactions. There was a whole room of her work, and she also does, there's a video installation that she had produced for it as well. And they're so generative, these works. They're exciting and fecund and terrifying, and I defy anybody to stand in front of one of her works for a couple of minutes and not have a very strong reaction. And quite often that reaction is confusion. You're like, I don't know how I feel about this. It's absolutely disgusting. And what I found quite funny in preparing this talk for you, Seda, was I'm not somebody who normally writes about sexuality and erotics. It's something I've always kind of avoided in my academic work, but it had to be addressed. It's just so obviously there. And I think because she's taking traditional historic depictions of Black women, we're talking here in like plantation landscapes, you know, 18th, 19th century paintings, and they are so racist and hypersexualized. And instead of trying to avoid that, she's like really forcefully occupying, she's planting herself in that subjectivity, and then she's turning it on its head, and it's incredibly powerful. And then so yeah, and for my project I'm interested in the, you know, the post-human in terms of the natural. There are other people who write about her works and cyborgs, because a whole other section of her work uses machinery, and so these assemblages have kind of computers and mobile phones and little bits of metal and whatever. So I don't want to deny that side of her work. It's just that I was interested in trees because nobody else seemed to have picked up on that, and I was wondering, when I found those early sketchbooks, I was like, wow, she's been doing this since the beginning when she was an art student. In really, you know, the picture of the woman's genitals and crotch, which is a tree, I was just like, what is she doing?
Yeah.
So
I think I was just going to say, I think what fascinates me about her work, and now that you also mentioned the machine ones, which I should definitely get, is this kind of this perspective on the human, and almost like a calling for this interconnectedness that we somehow tend to deny with narratives of kind of anti-humanism, or you know, machines will take over. There's kind of, you know, all sorts of kind of discourses around there, which always kind of put the human at the center, and kind of never lets us actually connect fully and thoroughly with the nature or with the machine actually. So I really like that fluidity in her work. There is a question in the Q&A box, which is in Turkish, so if that's okay, I'll try and translate, but Rana might also translate it to you. So basically, one of our participants is quite confused about the notion of the mushroom, so the kind of approach. So the question is, so do you think then for the human to carry on life as kind of life form, then should we take mushrooms as our kind of role models or our examples? Because of their kind of perseverance and resistance, I suppose. That's what Yetin's trying to say.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm sorry if I had to skip over a lot of material a little bit quickly. It's an idea that's developed in that book, The Mushroom at the End of the World, which is actually, there's a new book that just came out a couple of months ago in that series. Anyway, yeah, so there's a small number of researchers called the Matsutake Research Group who look at this one specific Japanese mushroom, which is highly prized. Yeah, what they're saying, I think they're anthropologists, which is also interesting. They're not biologists, which is where people and mycology and people studying mushrooms tend to come out of biology, because mycology doesn't have its own sort of students learn biology and then maybe they become people who study mushrooms. These are anthropologists, so they are interested in the way in which human communities are foraging for mushrooms, are transporting mushrooms from regions in China all the way down to back over to Japan, in global commodity chains of mushrooms. But they're also specifically interested in whether the mushroom itself has agency, and how is the mushroom making humans and other animals do things. So there are fascinating accounts of just the tenacity and the intelligence, sentience, essentially. All of our traditionally humanist ideas of intelligence and agency can also be applied to things like these mushrooms and other animals. You know, they manage to entice insects to come to them. They manage to encourage animals to eat them and then transport them many miles somewhere else and then defecate. And that is how the mushroom kind of travels. So it's a really fascinating account, but I think it becomes a bit more metaphorical. I think what they're saying is that the mushrooms help us to remember that we are part of an ecosystem, that humanity is not separate from nature. It's not helpful to talk about human nature and culture, that we're all part of this kind of system of energy, and that in a way, it's an acceptance of climate catastrophe, which I think is really terrifying. And this is the bit of my talks when I often get people, it seems too provocative and people get quite upset with some of the texts I'm showing them, because I think they're asking us to accept that human society is changing and will have to change. We know that climate crisis means there will be a lot more climate refugees, that our standards of living will change. They may go down, you know, we may not be able to have access to all of the products that we have come to depend on to maintain a particular kind of life and a particular kind of appearance. We're already seeing with COVID how some of those things, those systems and infrastructures and cross-continental transport of commodities is changing. And I think the books about mushrooms are trying to show us a life form that is much older than humanity's, because these mushrooms, remember that mushrooms are just the fruit, right? The mycelium, the root system, is the main organism, and these organisms made life possible. Without the fungus, we would never have had soil, we would never have had trees, we wouldn't even have fossil fuels. So they're absolutely integral to the evolutionary history of the whole planet, and they are much older than humanity, and guaranteed they will survive longer than humanity does, however many more hundreds of thousands of years hopefully we have on this planet. So I think trying to learn to think more like mushrooms and live more like mushrooms is a kind of, it's what Patricia McCormick describes as, we need activism. We need to stop thinking in a way that we can just carry on with these lives where we extract, you know, fossil fuels and we don't change our own lifestyle and everything will be fine, because it obviously won't. So it's a philosophical project as well as a kind of activist project, I think. I hope that answers the question, but feel free to come back if not.
Yeah, I mean, to my mind, it does. So yeah, Yetkin, if this wasn't clear, you can always kind of type in the chat box. I find it fascinating, actually, kind of metaphorically speaking, how mushrooms are resilient. And actually, there's kind of a lot of popular culture on this as well. There are films and TV series who kind of post-apocalyptic and kind of really have narratives around kind of mycelium systems. I can't remember I think it's called The Expanse, probably. Is that the kind of mycelium structure that kind of takes over in a way. Any other questions or comments or observations? I only see one question in the Q&A, which I have just translated, but if I am missing anything, I'm just going to check my phone quickly if I'm missing anything. I guess not. Well, I suppose it's time to move on anyway, but if you happen to think of a question for Caroline, you can still kind of type it in the chat and we can come back to it at the end. But I really, really thank you, Caroline. This was seriously mind-blowing. I am just amazed. I'm just amazed by how, you know, how people think and how, you know, I mean, it gives me, I think it's, I'm glad you said that there's kind of an acceptance of the catastrophic picture that we have. But then I think through these metaphors, there's also, I find it quite hopeful, actually, that we have other forms to look and understand and actually connect with, rather than actually kind of dominate over. So thank you very much, Caroline. And now it is, yeah, Beatrice Kabur. So Beatrice will be talking about digital theatre and different forms of digital theatre. So we are kind of moving to a slightly kind of different landscape in a way. But obviously, I think for this project, I think it's really important to, you know, rather than thinking, oh, how am I going to connect these things? I think you should just kind of sit and try to understand what each person is talking about, and really come back to these recordings and revisit and make notes. And then you will definitely see the connections, especially in your fashion projects and performance dramaturgy. So these components will come together, hopefully through a collage, actually, as kind of Caroline explained the importance of it. The floor is yours, Beatrice. I'll do the kind of 5-minute waiver to you, and I'll mute myself now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, if people find the connection, please let me know, because I was there trying to say, how do I take them from this to what I'm going to talk about? And I was like, let's just, let's just do it. it's okay. So guys, I'm going to talk to you about different forms of digital theater. I'm going to share with you a presentation, and I'm going to run through it, and then we can have our questions at the end. And I will, something open, sorry. And then I will send you different links so you can go deeper in the different subjects that we're going to talk about. So I'll show you. Let me share my screen with you. Okay. There we go. I'm gonna do this. Right. So, marhaba. A little bit late, but hello, everyone. My name is Beatriz Cabur. I've been working in theater since a long time ago, and in digital theater since 2012. So way before everything started. Today, I'm gonna, this presentation has three parts: concepts, experiences, that it's like, because my knowledge about this comes from my own practice and practical research. So this is what we're going to go through. And then part three, some quick thoughts about everything and how it comes together. So fastest way for you to get to the website where everything is just get your phones up, take a picture, and this will take you there. Or I will send you the link at the end of the presentation. Let's go through concepts. Live stream theater, online theater, digital theater, aren't all these the same? And what about recorded theater available online? What's that? Right? And don't they all look like this? Aren't they? It's like, this is what happened. So this is AI, obviously. It's fun. I just asked, give me people on a Zoom call all in costumes. This is what we think about if we think about digital theater. No, this is not what we're going to talk about. Totally different. So let's go a little bit back. What was digital theater before the pandemic? Before the pandemic, the term digital theater was being used to refer to shows created by theater makers using multimedia assets and actors to be experienced in a theater venue, right? Oh, give me a second. There. This is an example of digital theater, 1958. And the important bit is like the play of the actors cannot exist without the film. You can see in the background of this stage that there's the same actors are on stage and they're interacting with themselves. So the film has a dramatic function within the show. That was already digital theater as it was understood before the pandemic. So what defined digital theater? First, there had to be some form of digital or multimedia technology in the staging. Sorry, I moved this. There. 2, there had to be an actor performing live on stage. 3, it had to have a pre-established structure. And 4, there had to be verbal, visual, and/or musical elements in it. Another example would be this. And it's more or less the same. Can you hear it? Seda, can you hear the sound of the video? No, that's fine. You can, it's on the website on shows that we present today. So you can all watch them after if you want to. This is the same structure as what we were seeing from 1958. It's, she has a camera on top, but the only difference is that the projections are live, as opposed to the other ones being film, but it still belongs to the same category. This is just digital theater because we're using digital assets on the staging. And we have people on the same theater. So what defines live stream theater now? Live stream theater refers to shows created by theater makers using online tools, software, hardware, digital assets, and actors to be experienced online live. let me do this, right. Then there has to be an open bidirectional channel between the audience and the stage that allows them to communicate live. This is the main thing that wins the arguments. When people say, but this is not theater, you go, well, yes, because we communicate and the energy of the audience affects the performance. I hear you breathing, I understand your rhythm. It's the same thing that happens on a theater venue, hopefully. So this is an example of live stream theater. And this show had 3 different kinds of styles. We will talk about the styles within the show. For now, we're talking about the shape of it. And this is like within it. And this, I was gonna say, yes, we had the live stream was happening on YouTube while we had the audience on Zoom. So there was like, we were in 2 spaces at the same time. And the audience was able to speak amongst themselves during the show. And this is really important because that would happen and we had the audio from the Zoom where the play was happening. That was in my house. So these are the different things. Okay, and then we can play. Sorry, because I can't hear it and it's distracting me. So we play as well with text on screen, and we play with different things that would be more film style with this. And this is something that the medium allows us to do. So we have this is the first scene. It was like kind of naturalistic style. Then we have the second part of it in which we have these 2 characters playing with each other, and this is related to something I will talk about now. And then the third part, it was like more like a YouTuber style. So it was taking you through different styles to keep you engaged. That was the idea of this. So that was live stream theater. What is broadcasted theater? Broadcasted theater is when a live show happening in a theater, which was not this one, that wasn't happening in a theater, that was happening in a particular space, can be watched in a cinema at the same time it's happening. The actors on stage deliver their performance as they normally would any other night. But to make sure the audiences watching in cinema have the best seat in the house, the position of the cameras is tailored to capture each moment in the production. All technical teams make sure that every element on stage, such as lighting, hair, and makeup, look fantastic on the big screen. And then the recording of that can be distributed to other cinema venues, and then it becomes screen theater. So screen theater is a theater that was broadcasted before, and now you watch it, so it's not live anymore. But the audience are all together in the same space. That's important. So, for example, National Theatre usually does broadcasted, screen recorded, and sometimes online, because you can watch it on places like Digital Theatre Plus, but it's not by definition digital or live stream. So this is just the video of a normal play. Right. Again, you can watch the videos later. So what is online theatre? Online theatre refers to shows created by theatre makers using online tools, software, hardware, digital assets, and actors to be experienced online. So it's broader than what we are talking now, right? We can make the tree of different forms. So online would be here, and then we have them under this one. Online theatre does not need to be live, like stream theatre is not live. Think about how recorded theatre becomes recorded theatre. It's not considered just theatre anymore when it is stored in video format. In the same way, live stream theatre becomes online theatre. And as well, it can also refer to any theatre that is available online. The issue with all these terms is that they're all new. We were just defining them as they were happening. So there's some, I and some other people, we wanted to define all of this so we can keep researching on them and going deeper into each form. So what is a digital stage? is a different thing. A digital stage is an online shared non-physical space in which artists meet to rehearse, create, or perform a piece. It is a place situated between here and there, but it is not a liminal space. We're not in transit. The digital stage is the destination. It is the ahí. I don't know if this word exists in Turkish, but in Spanish, we have here, which is aquí. We have there, which is allí. And we have ahí, which is the place in the middle. So for example, my mom calls the internet ahí. So anytime she goes, look ahí, you know, so it's in our mind, it's very real. So that is where the digital stage exists, in that place in the middle. And the digital stage only fully exists in our minds. And as in on-site theater, we should work towards building a unique shared reality. The end product of what is created in a digital stage does not necessarily need to be an online piece or even digital theater. We'll go through the experiences in a minute. And now, digital defines the edges of the biological and vice versa through their simultaneous presence on stage. Its contrast, opens up dialogue between the two natures, creating a semi-fictional dialogic interaction relevant to our current social evolution. This dialogic interaction allows audience and performance creators alike to better conceptualize ourselves in relation to our changing environment. This book, it's in the website as well. I really recommend this. This is like the Bible of digital theater, but she calls digital theater, she refers to it as the before the pandemic term. So don't expect to find online or live stream in this book. So let's wrap up this. Digital theater before the pandemic happens in a theater venue, experience live in a theater venue. Live stream theater happens anywhere, experience live anywhere you're watching it through your device connected live to the internet. Broadcasted theater happens in a theater venue, experience live in a cinema venue. Screen theater happened in a theater venue, experienced in a cinema venue. Recorded theater happened in a theater venue, experience anywhere you're watching it, online, offline. And online theater happens anywhere, experience anywhere you're watching it, online live or online recorded. So some formal possibilities of these types of theater. The entire work is broadcasted live to a delocalized audience with respect to the entire cast. Or this is where the fun starts to happen. All scenarios have equal status and all actors are live streamed in another stage. And thanks to the telepresence, the two are in a common space in which drama is possible. This is digital theater. So for example, Virtual Dinner Party was a show that it was staged in 2011 by a group called the Internationalists, and it happened in New York and Berlin at the same time. So in two theaters. So in New York, there was a table, there were actors in here, and at the end there was a screen, and in here, the people in Berlin were projected, right? While in Berlin, we had another table, and there was another screen at the end, and we could see the people in New York. So it was like kind of the same thing that people in New York and Berlin were watching, but they were obviously in different places. So they were like two audiences, to this, to that. That was quite fun. So another example is one part of the cast is delocalized with respect to the other actors, and the actors and the other cast are in the same space. We will talk about this play in a minute, and I will show you how it looked like on screen. And then another option is the live stream is only used in parts of the play, while other scenes take the physical space that the rest of the cast shares with the audience. So there was one play called Ronensburg, and there was like a group of, there was a meeting between the aristocrats. So that meeting was live streamed onto stage, and the actors were talking with them. So they were like, okay, listen, we have to talk about this, blah, blah, blah. So they were like, do you remember the Queen record? That was the faces were like this. There were like 4 faces on a black background. So these looked like this, and they were interacting with it, and it was only for their scene. So this is, again, a possibility of it. Then another thing is that the entire work performed by one actor is live streamed to a scattered online audience gathered in a digital space. This is the play we talk about, the Childbirth 19 play. Another one is the cast is physically scattered, the audience is physically scattered, the entire show is live stream, and we're all in the same digital space. Yes, in Clytemnestra, this show, I'll show you an image later. There was one actress in London, one actress in Singapore, and then production was in London, and I was directing it from London as well. And one thing that we did in this show, because this was recent, because of how much we were learning from other experiences, is that I sent the same green screen to both actresses, because the color makes it look, you notice the difference. I'll show you a picture of that from another example. We also have immersive live stream theater in which the characters interact with one audience member at a time. So for example, in 2012, there were one thing called Long Distance Affair, and it was a show produced by a New York company. They were like, the show happened on a theater venue, but it was like fully pandemic proof, in the sense that it was like one audience member with one actor in the same time. But what you bought, if you were going there, were 3 tickets, and there were like 6 laptops on a stage, and then you could choose which 3 shows you wanted to experience. And the show was like, the text, for example, had like blank spaces that would be filled with the information that was given by the audience member. So it was like a one-on-one show. Then we have immersive live stream theater in which the characters interact with the audience as a whole or in group. Ghostbusters was a show that was created by a group called Secret Cinema, and they used to rent massive warehouses, and they create in-world sets of different movies. So for example, I went to watch several, but one was Blade Runner, and they create the Blade Runner world, and you walk around it, and then they show you the movie. So during the pandemic, what they did was like trying to transpond that onto a digital stage, and they did Ghostbusters. So you had different actors getting the audience divided in groups, and there were like 5 groups 5 people in each group. So we were being ushered by one of the actors through the different stages that they created for us. And then we had a mission. It was quite gamified, this experience. And then we saw the ghosts, blah, blah, blah. So it was like immersive live stream gamified theater. So how many kinds of digital theater are there then, right? There are 8 conditions and 16 combinations that establish different kinds of digital theater right now. If you'd like to know what they are in detail, we can go here. I'll send you this link. Let me see, what time is it? Okay, yes. I'll send you this link and you can go through it. It's very easy. They are presented in pairs of opposites. For example, live show, recorded show, stage is one space, is in several spaces like this, and then we combine them. Are you seeing this? Yes? Okay, sorry. Good. So we can, you can have a look at that later on. Now, the controversy, because we've met so much of this before the pandemic, no one cared. No one cared about digital theater. You know, people who the makers that were making digital theater, we were quite comfortable because we were like a tiny group, you know, showing our things to each other and friends, family, but it wasn't really exploded. But then it exploded and everyone started asking these things. Is this still theater? Am I allowed to do this? Are other people in other fields doing the same thing with more experience than me? So people were worried, like people that are making games, people that are making film, people that are making like online content, they are like more suited than me to do this. And then what is theater? Do I have a right to do this? Where does this end? Right? And the main thing, the main obstacle to make a digital theater play are people who are like the most experienced they are, the more issues they're going to have to jump into a digital theater production because they don't feel safe, or that they're not going to be working at the same level that they're used to, or they're basically scared. That's another thing that has happened several times. And then the main thing is that audiences do not believe live to digital is a substitute for live theater. So no one should feel threatened. It's a totally different experience. And then another thing, I'm going to jump through the first paragraph, but I'll tell you the third one. Those who stream are more diverse. And this is really important as well. 68% of the survey takers identifying as non-white British have streamed, nearly twice the average for white British respondents. This informs part of a critical and much broader discussion about participation as race in the Arts and Humanities Research Council. This is from 2016, so we're still pre-pandemic. Report on cultural value, whose authors argue that Black, Asian, and minority ethnic cultural practice and consumption have been particularly marginalized when discussing participation in cultural activity. So this is like this digital art is helping, you know, everyone's work. Let's go through experiences. They are like divided in three main groups. The first one is staging on-site theater in a digital stage. So first time I did something that you can call digital theater was 2012. This was a play that happened in New York. And from now on, in this part of the presentation, you're going to find these four categories. So what kind of show it was, where were we, what age we were, like not how old are we, but are we the same age group or not? And then if we know each other in person, if we have ever shared a physical space or not, because these things added, they make a difference in the result of the show. And okay, so this was the first one. What did I learn? What did we learn from here? Is that where the screen points at is really important, right? Because right now we're very frontal. Like everyone experimented with it like this, but you can move it and you can move yourself. So we started playing with this. It's like, where am I? Where's the screen? What can you see on the other side? And how to make this more engaging. Then another thing that we learn is that if I am directing this and I'm on a screen and everyone else is in the room, that is going to be really difficult because you're going to pay attention to the bodies in the room more than to me. So how do we fix that? What can we do with this? And then the third thing that we learned, it was that it was easier if we are online to chat about it, send a telegram about it, read an email about it, so we can work more in a transmedia universe. And then you can argue that it's more effective or not, but it's something that you can do. And then I'm not going in order. I'm just, this is the on-site place. So the years jump a little bit. I was in Madrid, the team was in Graz and in London. The age was really different, but we knew each other in person. So what happened in here to fix the screen issues is that because I was directing this, I arranged to be projected on a whole wall. So it's like, you cannot miss me. I was there and I was bigger than anyone and they loved it. It was like, it really works. So that's one way to fix the issue that I am smaller or my energy is not flowing through. So it just make me bigger. I mean, it sounds very basic, but it really worked. Then we have this play, and that was so difficult to do because this was about domestic abuse. It was really intense. And I was in London and the team was in New York. We know each other. We've worked before together really well. And we have the same levels of digital literacy. So everything was supposed to be easier, but it wasn't. And it was because of the theme of the play. And it was like so intense that they couldn't do it. And I couldn't help them go through the emotions or get rid of the emotions. So they were finishing the rehearsals. And even if we were making exercises and everything, they couldn't get rid of the weight of what the play was about. It was very difficult. Second part is staging live stream theater in a digital state. Humanity is Ugly. This was lovely. This is the Q&A after all the shows. There were lots of shows in the same day. And Humanity is Ugly is the cast that is in the bottom left. You can see all of them with the hospital gowns. So that was like 300 years combined, and it wasn't easy for them to get used to it because when you're doing something with computers, you think you need to know everything. but you're just the actor. I mean, I don't mean just as anything, the value in your work is the same thing as in normal theater. The actors don't want to know what's happening with the lights. They just don't care about that because there's another person doing that job. In digital theater, everyone thinks they need to know everything. And that is a very important thing to tell them. You don't. There's a person taking care of that. You're fine. You don't need that. But they were so insecure about it that from the production team, we hire a person to teach them everything. So it's like, okay, this is making you so insecure. Let's hire someone and they will walk you through it. And then we took like a couple of days to do that and it worked. It was great. So this is the plane. What happened with the plane is that we had people in New York, in London and Madrid. And the idea was like, right now you see this screen and it's really, and it's not a surprise to you, right? It's normal. It's like 6 people on like 6 screens, 7 people, that's fine. When we were working on this, the technology didn't exist. We were helping create it. So this wasn't, no one was used to this. And we were like pushing the developers to do things that we needed for the show. And they couldn't do it. And we didn't have enough budget to get this done. So the idea was that the flight attendant, who's the guy with the blue jacket, we were gonna have one of those blue jackets in each set. So we were gonna have a person bringing things into the screens like this with the jacket. So it would create the illusion that he was in all the different seats, because these were gonna be seats in a plane, right? This was very frustrating, and we decided not to do this. And that was like a very hard decision to make, but it wasn't gonna work. So that's something that is like we're experimenting, we're researching, and it might not work, and that's fine. You know, that's okay. At some point it was like, show must go on. No, because it's not gonna work as it should. This is Ravensburg. This is the show I talked to you about with the 4 faces appearing at some times. And we also had different media in this show. We had video, and this scene is quite fun because what was happening, it was that we had the actor recorded, and what you could see on the screen was, imagine if I'm performing, I'm the actor performing, right? So I'm doing blah, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah. And then in the screen, you would see different angle, same thing happening, but then he would wink at you, but the actor didn't. So we had the same thing recorded, but with little variations, and you would doubt your own mind, like what's live, what's not live, what's happening. And you would be trying to put together that states that we were talking about. So that's happening, that's keeping people really engaged. Yes, right. Now, third category, staging live stream theater in a digital stage. We had Adela, which was part of the 2nd edition of the long distance affair show that I explained to you, that there were like different laptops. This happened in Mexico. The actress was in Spain. And this was a horror show on Skype, and it worked. And I was amazed. I was like, how are people scared? It's beyond me. And we were playing with lots of things. And at some point she said there was a beast sleeping. And she was telling the audience, now this is your responsibility. You need to take care of this. And people were shaking, like, what do I do? And I was like, people want to believe, right? So this is like the big thing that we're playing with. What happened in Adela, that was also amazing, that it was like the actress couldn't stop looking at herself while she was performing. So, because this is something that doesn't happen, obviously doesn't happen in theater, it may happen in ballet because you have a massive mirror, doesn't happen on film, you're not looking at yourself. This is the only medium in which it happens. Like I'm here, I'm looking at myself, and then I'm panicking because I'm trying to direct myself while I'm performing, and you can do that. And when I'm telling you it's good as a director, but you're seeing yourself and you're thinking it's not good, my voice is not going to override yours. So we had to do some things like you cannot see yourself, we cover the screen, and then it worked. Because the different, you're gonna have different difficulties when you're working on different mediums. And I had to go. here. I wasn't going to go, and I flew to Spain to help her with this, as it wasn't happening. And then we have another quote from Nadia Masura from Digital Theatre, The Making and Meaning of Life-Mediated Performance. That this duality of performance that I'm talking about that happened with Adela, human and digital other, is essential to the performance of digital theatre. The value of this experience lies in its ability to reinterpret current perceptions of the body and its value as both sign and symbol of the human individual. If we invert the term body image, used to connote the commoditized body represented through media, to image body, it can be used to indicate that the object of conversation is the digitized or mediated image, the digital other. So, I mean, she was confused. I understand that, because it's not easy. Right. Then this is the chef. We talk about that. And it was adorable. You can only fully rehearse a play online when it is going to be an online play. That seems silly, but it's really important to understand, because as it happened in this show, I wrote the show to be performed on Facebook Live. And for this show, we created different profile pages for different characters, because when we did this, Facebook didn't allow different people on the same live stream. So we only could have her, Carolina, performing, and then the other characters were commenting under the live stream. What we didn't thought about is that her own friends were going to be commenting. So the show was the character doing her thing, and then some of her friends saying, "Carolina, sing," and it was taking you out of the show. So it felt a little bit like street theater. And that was something that we were like, okay, let's see how we can use this thing that is happening that we cannot avoid. So let's incorporate it into the show. And yes, you can watch the show, they are recorded. And then the next year, Facebook told me this happened a year ago, like recording you remembering you the events in your life. And then Carolina told me, wouldn't it be fun if we make, the sequel? And then we did the sequel, but in this time, Facebook was already allowing you to put more people in the same live stream. So we got like a team of 5 actresses doing the same thing. And then we played with the audience that were the friends of the actresses, getting them a little into the show. Yes. And one thing that also happened here is that it got very expensive. And if people think about digital theater, first thing is that it's going to be very cheap, right? It's like we have the things that we need to do it. We have this, but online or digital theater is as expensive or more, because you need to add, the cameras, the lighting, extra things to it. And now this is the crown jewel, which is staging hybrid theater on a hybrid stage. I'll give you the example. This was a play called Oriente Plus, and it was a show to be performed on site. I think this is still touring, and on a website. So it was going to happen at the same time in a place with an audience and online with a different or the same audience, because we made it possible for the people who were watching it live to watch it online as well. So they could have these 2 inputs, and then the result was different from one or the other. So for this show, I thought about the 3 stagings. It's like, what is these people going to see? What is these people going to see? What are these people going to see? And this is the online version. The play is about Caribbean mom from, I don't know, it's Caribbean mom and her daughter, and then how the tourists affect their relationship. And that was like, because the daughter is young and she wants to be part of that, and as well of this, and she's renouncing. Well, so, and also part of the cast had different disabilities. So the actor that was playing the snake was deaf, and he also had some vision issues. Right, I will explain you why I'm telling you this. So this was the website, what you're seeing right now. In this part, you have the vulture, which represents the tourists. In this part, you have the snake that is associated with creation myths, and it was the shaman that was in the play, Right. So the Voltor was a tourist in the show. He was wearing a green screen. In the back of the green screen, the website where you could watch the show was in, so you could see it. And then the green screen was used to do effects online. And it was also fun for the character. He was live streaming vertically, and the language was really, really fast. So he was moving like this, he was doing things like that. On the right side of the screen, we had the serpent perspective, and it was horizontal, it was slow, and it had filters on it that made you see and hear as David would. So it was like really distorted from your perspective, but it was like, it's the only way you can access his experience is like this. I cannot do this live. So this is where it gets really interesting for me. At the same time, you have the chat in the website. So I am okay with people talking while the show is happening, because I think it adds another layer of liveness to it. And then while you were, we had also the soundtrack of it. This was like really well produced. So while you were waiting, or even if you wanted, while the show was happening, you could play the songs of the show there. So this was lovely. It's a lot of work. We tested and experimented with everything, because what I wanted to get was the same style and aesthetics of this company, which is really established, into the online world. It was a lot of work. Yes, this is what I've talked to you about, the cameras and where do we put the camera. And then he was playing like this, so I wanted a camera here to go with all that movement. So these are the things that I was talking to you that were in each slide. So it was like, what type of theater it is, how much technology are we using, what is the cultural diversity of the cast, age diversity, and then have we ever shared a physical common space or not? So this is what makes it low or high effort for the people in the production to make the show happen. So obviously, if it's traditional theater, no technology, local cast, same age group, we all know each other, 2 minutes, you have a show. It's very easy, it flows, the production. And then digital, all the technology, international cast, different age group, no previous relationship, get ready to work on that, because it's gonna bump into some things. So yes, I'm almost there. Digital stages, thoughts. Now, how fast everything goes, you need to experiment and know your tools, because this was 2021, and then the next one I'm going to show you is still 2021. So this was white on white, amazing thing about, this is like, have you seen it, Seda? This is about the polar bears losing it, and there is very eco. Have you seen it? It's lovely. And what we did here, let me see if you can see there. Yes. So she was in London, he was in New York. We had one picture that we cut in 2 halves. And then we sent a set of pictures to one actor, another set of pictures, and they had to change the backgrounds and they would align. So the technology, the tech part of this is like, you go first, then you go, because otherwise they get swapped. So it was like very tricky to see. Now you go, then she goes. And I want to show you, what is this? This is what I was talking to you about before, the colors. Can you see that her color is darker than the bear color? And the picture was the same. It's like, if you see them in the same computer, they look the same, but they don't. So these little things you need to keep adjusting and sending. At the end, the easiest way of doing it is sending everyone the same equipment. And then we won't have these issues, but we will have the issues of connectivity, blah, blah, blah. Yes. And then months later, Zoom launches this. We can have layers now. So I don't need to do these pictures. I don't need to send you the same equipment. I don't need to do anything, because right now I can delete your background and layer you, and I choose the background from a unified location. So for the actors, it gets easier when the technology keeps developing, because the people who control the technology are going to take on more work than what they have to do. And that was, yes. And you can still launch video before, because this was recorded there. That was recorded, and then she was live, and you couldn't even feel it. But a month before, that was very difficult to do. So that's the code again. I'll send you the website now. I'm not gonna try to say that, but okay. Yes.
I'm sure you can say that, but thank you, you, Beatrice. That gives us a lot to think about. I mean, I think it's incredible. I don't know to what extent the audience is aware of all these kind of different layers of what we today call digital performance or digital theatre. So there are lots of combinations, lots of layers, and I think still we're trying to kind of scholarship is trying to actually grasp these notions and accept them, because as you said, there is some resistance, and sometimes not an acceptance. So yeah, if you want to,
this is the website. Yes,
this is the link, right? So if you want to have a look at Beatrice's work, this is the website.
This is the website for the box? Yes, I'll do it right now. This is the website for the for this talk, right? So what you will find here, this is the presentation extended. What we do today is a shortened one. So here you can find the extended presentation. Here is the document we talked before. This is a text that was from, I think, 2004. That is telepresence in text-based theater. I wrote this, it was published, so I was very interested in this even before technology allowed it. Then we have here some books. If you want to go deeper into it, you have some of them that I quoted throughout the presentation. Then you have resources, tools, and software. If you want to play and make digital theater plays and everything, here you have some resources, tools, and software. And then, because all the artificial intelligence explosion that we're going through right now, here you have some links to some things that are going to be used or are being used right now to create different forms of digital art, and they're amazing. And here are the shows mentioned during the workshop. And if anyone has any question tomorrow or the day after or anytime, they can just send me the question there.
That's great. Thank you, Beatrice. If you can type it in,
yes.
I suppose
Done.
you have already.
Yes.
There's one comment which is basically a very kind thank you. Mara says basically she has never heard this kind of a detailed description and explanation of digital theatre, and she finds it very kind of mind-opening. So, and yeah, there are other thanks which I'm sure you can translate that word as you know it. Is in the kind of Q&A.
Yes.
Let me kind of check the other boxes. Okay, so are there any questions or comments from either English-speaking or Turkish-speaking participants? Yeah, there's an English one which you can.
Yes, I'll read it. My question is, I have been experimenting with digital theater too, so I'm very excited and don't have fears. Amazing. However, I have many colleagues and they're scared that digital theater will destroy live theater. That won't happen. No, that won't happen. That ever. No. I think what's happening is that there are people from different mediums feeding into online content creation, and it depends on which field you're coming from. You're going to put that knowledge into what you're doing, and it also depends on where are your audiences, because that is something that when I'm making a play, I want to say to someone specifically. So where are they is always my question. I have never done something digital because of I wanted to do something digital. Everything that I've done, it's because I wanted to reach a specific audience that was there. It's not like I'm just doing this because I want to play with my laptop. I did, I don't know which one. I don't know. It's like each one was targeted at a specific audience. So if I want to do a show, like I'm doing like normal shows as well, because I did like you can have another presentation of my works that are non-digital, and then you will see why I am doing these ones and I am doing that ones. I did a show about abortion in New York, And I wanted to go to American audiences in that place at that time. So this theater is not dying because you want to connect with certain people, you know, and you have your audiences. It's a way of communication. So that's, I don't think there is. I hope I answered that. Did I? MacBook?
So I just got confused because I think if we put the link in the chat box to
Yes.
everyone, rather
Yes.
than, let me try this. So everyone should be able to see this.
I cannot do it to everyone.
Yeah,
My only options are host and panelist or each individual panelist.
I send it to everyone, so every participant should be able to see the link now. If you cannot, please.
Let me,
I think everyone can see that now. So correct me if I am wrong. Okay. Okay, so I suppose mine is not necessarily a question, but maybe just a kind of an invitation, particularly to the kind of participants, I think, who are involved in this project, or actually not. So kind of perhaps combining the idea of the posthuman and maybe also kind of connecting it with Caroline's talk as well. So when I mean, this is just a suggestion, can we think about different forms of digital theatre as a form to, especially the immersive one. So this is what I am envisioning, an immersive digital theatre practice, an immersiveness, and this could be a hybrid form. Part of it takes place in nature, in kind of direct connection with, for example, trees, if we are kind of looking at the kind of similar narratives. And
I'm like very interested in, were you in the geolocated talk? There was a seminar recently. I was there. Were you? It was about geolocated art. Do you remember that? Okay, yeah. So because I was like really interested in that, because I had some issues at my son's school with the community is very diverse, so there was some racism in it, and I was thinking, like, what can I do to help, alleviate the situation? So I thought about doing geolocated art of the children telling stories in different places, and there's a map that you can go through. So there's like little performance, and you can walk through the map as well. So if you're on that location, that story will pop in your phone, whatever, if you're navigating that. So I think that's something that goes with nature, can be, it's like as soon as you're like on the open air, this can happen if you're in this environment.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I'll come back to that, but there's another question. I need to translate this, so bear with me. So an anonymous attendee says that in all the digital theatre forms, we see the presence of a screen, even if there is a real actor and simultaneous participation. Do you think that this kind of the presence of the screen is making the experience of theatre, kind of individualizing it, kind of making it more individual or kind of subjective, and taking away the collective experience of theatre, or changing the collectivity, the notion of collectivity in the experience of theatre? You're mute, Beatrice.
What was the first bit of it?
Sorry, say it again. The
first bit of the question?
So basically, the first bit is kind of an observation. So there is, yes. So when we look at digital theatre forms, we always see the presence of screen, even when there is a real actor and a simultaneous participation. Mm-hmm. So based on this, do you think this kind of style in digital theatre takes away from the collective experience of theatre, which is basically we are in the same room, we are here and now, and we feel the presence of others and the presence of performers?
I think we're going towards that, not towards taking away from the experience, but towards working on that, because we watched the the royal, what was the one that was Shakespeare, that was a tree?
The
Remember that
Globes one. Yeah, it was the
The
another.
Royal Shakespeare Company?
Yeah, it was the Royal Shakespeare Company. This was
Yes,
during the
what
pandemic.
Yes,
and
what I
it was-
liked the most of the whole thing was the moment where we were all waiting together in the same space. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I was like, what's going to happen with us? What are they going to do with us? Because we want that collective experience to happen. Also, side note, 5G was pushed for as a technology because the people working on it, they, on their hobby life, they're musicians. So they were working with an orchestra and transmitting through 4G. The musicians could hear the delay, even with the best equipment ever. And they are pushing this to improve to lose the delay, which is a problem when we want to feel connected, you know? So that evolution is set to help us be more connected. At the same time, like people who are working in developing the technology, that's what they have in mind. And I wrote an article called "I Want to Hear You Breathing," and it's related to that. It's like we need to stay in the same place, and the VR sets that reproduce theaters, I want them to, if I look there, I want to see the other person watching the same show, because right now you can see VR theater, but you're not live in the same space as the other people as part of the experience. Sometimes it's as part of the software, but not as part of the show, you know? And I think the people who create the show, they should curate that experience as well. And that is happening. I can see examples of that. So I don't think we're gonna lose we felt very lonely during the pandemic, you know, and there were things that were like pulling us apart, and we're working to counteract that effect.
And I suppose in addition to that, what I would like to add personally as a person who kind of thinks about digital theatre and theatre in general is that I suppose the best way to understand these new forms, newer than the kind of historical good old theatre, is not to kind of try to compartmentalize or kind of antagonize one, or kind of try to see them as kind of polar opposites, or compare and contrast. It is more of a new form that is evolving. This doesn't mean that one has to stay and the other has to stop.
No, never.
It just means that they can simultaneously exist. And we always kind of need to think about, you know, why do we need these things? Why are we interested in these new forms? And who do these new forms serve? One example would be, or kind of one important topic, I think, in terms of digital theatre is the accessibility. And I think that quotation that you read was very important. Disabled people, financially, economically underprivileged people who were not able to afford going to the theatre, or maybe in their towns or villages, there is no access to theatre. So making these things available, whether it's kind of streamlined, online, digital, etc., also kind of has other kind of political meanings and importances, and you know, they come from a different form of necessity, perhaps, rather than just thinking, is it going to be the end of theatre, or is it going to end the collective experience? I mean, theatre will never take away that magical feeling of being in the same room with these people and feel the kind of, you know, the sweat of the dancer's body, or the breathing of the performers, or kind of the annoying person sitting next to you. These things are incredibly important, but the other experience is another experience, and you feel different things in this experience. So I think that is very important to note, if you don't mind me, Beatrice. Yeah, I have.
No, and you cannot give something to an artist, make it part of their everyday life, and not want them to do something artistic with it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, I gotta have something and I want to play with, I don't know. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Beatrice. I suppose I mean, it is bang on 2 o'clock, which would mean 5 o'clock in Turkey. So this is. We
made it.
Yeah, we made it. We absolutely made it. This was great. So I would like to thank everyone personally to my collaborator Shule Atesh, who is in Istanbul now, who is actually the mind behind this project. Our translator Rana, who is also doing a great job, I'm sure, at the moment. Our helpers, our speakers Caroline and Beatrice, and also, of course, to British Council and the theatre, the Centre for Contemporary Theatre at Birkbeck College, University of London, and of course to our participants who on a Sunday, I'm sure a glorious Sunday from wherever you are attending. So the next one, the next talk is going to be on 12th of February on Sunday at the same time, and there'll be 2 speakers talking about some interesting topics. So that will be advertised. Just keep an eye on social media and the website. So we will be keeping you posted. Thank you, everyone. And if we can stop the recording, I will close the session.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.